Welcome back, everybody, to Two Guys in a Stack of Comics. My name is Reed. Along with me is Mike. We're going to do our weekly comic book news. We've been doing a couple different types of videos on the channel, but what we'll try to do weekly now is just do a weekly comic book news sort of video. What we'll do in that, we'll kind of talk about four different topics and sort of break those down, kind of carry through. So for us, what we wanted to talk this week, very, very light week of new comics for this week. So we're going to talk about the best new comics of this week. We're going to talk about, sadly, the passing of a legendary DC and Marvel creator. We'll also talk a little bit about some updates with what's going on with Diamond and how Diamond is handling some things and how that's affecting the industry. And then we have one other book we'll talk about as well this week where some delays absolutely killed the book and just talk about the overall problems that's causing industry in the industry as well. We'll lead off with our first topic. The big debut for this month, the big debut for this week at least, Captain America #1, Chip Zdarsky. I think this is a Marvel Rivals kind of variant cover that was the last one they had at the store. Cap's been out of action for a bit. Cap has not had a solo series. I think we're going on, it was close to 6 or 7 months with no Steve Rogers #1 book. His last two series lasted less than 20 issues. And then were canceled. He's not currently Captain America in the Avengers. They have Sam Wilson occupying that role. So there's been a lot of struggles getting Steve Rogers going lately. And with it being Independence Day, I guess it's good timing here for the Marvel to get out a Captain America book. We'll talk a little bit about this book and then just talk about what me and Mike are seeing as a problem with the way the industry's handling Steve Rogers and how that's going. So as far as this book, this is Chip Zdarsky. Zdarsky is interesting in that, Mike, I think you've liked some of his stuff. I really liked his Daredevil. I did not like his Batman, but I think he's a good writer overall. I get Valerio Schiti on the art on this. It's a well-drawn book. It's a well-illustrated book. There's some interesting wrinkles, and I think overall this was an interesting debut for Captain America. I think definitely enough that I would pick up the subsequent issues. There's some interesting revelations. It's basically a book set where Cap is coming out of the ice for the first time. So it's Marvel sort of resetting that period a little bit with some new wrinkles thrown in. I think there's a lot of interesting things there. However, what we're going to talk about, not so much talking about this issue, but Michael, could get to you on this. Cap has struggled to keep a title for a while. Why do you think it is that Marvel's struggling so much with Steve Rogers lately? And that this is a character, yeah, his first series, before there was a Marvel Comics got canceled. But largely, since he came out of the ice in the Avengers and got his own solo book, it's never been an issue for Steve to keep a book. And lately, there just seems to be a churn on the character where he canceled. Why do you think Marvel's struggling so much with Steve Rogers lately?
I think they strayed away from who Steve was, and I think as a company they decided to prop up other characters and instead of Steve. But Captain America was a solid book. Like when I was a kid in the '70s, I was reading that book every month, and his sidekick, the Falcon, was amazing. For a kid to see those two battling crime and going after, Zemo and everything, it was a good comic, but it was good because Steve was, the all-American guy, and his buddy, the Falcon, was, amazing, and they just were a great team. Mm-hmm. And then, more recently, I think they've really tried to, in the last 20 years or so, they really tried to, I think they lost their focus on Steve. And I think it may have been in part kind of like the Big Blue Boy Scout for Superman kind of thing, where they tried to break him down and make him into something that he wasn't, where, these are truly aspirational characters. That's why people love them. And once you leave that on the table, I mean, you could have an Elseworld story, or you could have a short series where, you examine that part of that character, but then you got to get back to Steve. So that's what I'm hopeful about this, is that we get back to the All-American Captain America,
Yeah, I mean, when we look at the fact that they've made him a Nazi, they had, what was his name, Ta-Nehisi Coates, right? A title that for Captain America that just wasn't very flattering of Steve Rogers. I look at the way they had him show up in X-Men 97, where Rogue basically treats him like crap and acts like he's the problem. I think that what's happened to Steve Rogers is, like you said, I think there's been an effort to prop up other characters. They have, sadly, you and I both love Sam Wilson. They have sadly tried to prop him up, and by doing that, I think they felt like the only way we can really do that is to push Steve down, which is, I think, a net negative for everybody because if you like Sam Wilson, you probably like Steve Rogers. And if you like Steve Rogers, you probably like Sam Wilson. And so it's kind of a weird decision to put that against each other. I think the primary reason the book has struggled, and it will be interesting to see if Zdarsky can overcome this. And I was optimistic in this, and that there was a great scene in this book where Steve Rogers meets Mr. Fantastic, and Mr. Fantastic is kind of helping him out a little bit. He's asked because the main mission they're setting up is he's going to go to Latveria and confront Doom in this. And so he goes to Reed Richards for advice. And Reed Richards is just, he's a little bit like in awe of like, this is the guy that I grew up idolizing. Like I had your action figure. And it was a cool scene to have that because that's who Steve Rogers should be. He should feel awkward with it, which he does, but he should be the guy that people look at as like, man, you're the legend. You're the Sentinel of Liberty, man, like Captain America. And I think they lost that a little bit, not
In the
only because
movies, they did it brilliantly with Coulson. Remember
yeah,
Coulson? Like he had
Coulson,
little,
he interacted with him the way
yeah,
Tony Stark was constantly like, my dad thought you were like the great, they did
exactly.
such a great job with that. And like you said, I think there's been this concerted effort of we don't want him to be that. He needs to be something else. I think another reason that this has happened that's been difficult is you and I have talked a little bit about politics and comic books. And while I don't think it's as bad as most people paint it to be, there's certainly been an overprevalence of political stuff in comic books. And Captain America has absolutely always been a political comic book. But what I think has happened, people lately have not been able to disassociate their complaints with America and their complaints about Steve Rogers. And so I think there's been some conflation of those two things where they take like a criticism of the United States and put it on to Steve Rogers. And I think that's where you get crap like X-Men 97 where you have Rogue lecturing him about how he didn't do enough for the mutants and
Yeah.
treating him like he's this government stooge and it's like that's not Steve Rogers at all. That may be you projecting how you feel about something. That's not who this character is. It's not who the character's ever been. Steve Rogers has it multiple times when the
Yeah.
government's been in the wrong, taken the A off or dropped the shield. And so it's just, I think it's bad writing. Go ahead, Mike.
Yeah. At the very beginning, he was aspirational in a sense where the country as a whole wanted to stay out of the conflict in Europe. We were
Mm-hmm.
very isolationist. And Jack Kirby and Joe Simon created this character to kind of help remind the country who we are
Yep.
and what the right thing is to do. And they created this character to kind of, help our country aspire to greater things. And you can be critical of America, but you got to keep Steve, pure. He's our North Star.
He's
And yeah,
Superman of the Marvel universe. He needs to
yeah,
be the beacon.
right. He's
And
our North Star. So you could have him, rather than taking him down a peg, you could have him helping us show the way, which is what he really did when Joe and Jack created him.
yeah, no, and that there's a great Captain America thing. He always says, like, I'm loyal to nothing but the dream. That's Captain America. It's not
Yeah.
he's loyal to what the country's doing. It's not that he's loyal to whatever the most,
No, that was the comedian in The Watchmen.
yeah, and
Yeah,
that's
and Steve is not the comedian. Those are like
well, and that's the thing is him being a patriotic character doesn't mean he endorses that everything America's doing. He just believes in everything America should be. And I
right.
think we've had writers who can't conflate that idea with what they want to say. And so I think what we've had happen with so many of these runs is they have this like, it's got to be a book about America. Let me critique the heck out of America. Oh, but Steve's literally wearing the stars and stripes. I better take shots at him too, or have him be too overly negative, and it just
Mm.
feels out of character. And so,
Jack Kirby's rolling in his grave. He's like,
yeah,
that's not Cap.
No, and I'm optimistic that Zdarsky will be. This first issue was a good step in the right direction, I think. I'm optimistic after that Avengers Twilight, where he wrote a really good old man Steve Rogers, that maybe he'll be able to write something interesting. But no, hopefully this gets going. It's been really sad, I think, over the last decade, and that no character has really been kicked in the teeth more than Steve Rogers, down to them making him a Nazi, a lot of stupid time displacement stuff. I mean, just so many dumb story ideas and things.
The
Hopefully,
time he
he
became
will
Red Skull,
replicate
his
what he did.
nemesis.
Yeah,
Come
no,
on, man.
they took him out of the Avengers. I just think they've got to give us back, as you said. He's got to be the big blue boy scout kind of thing, like Superman is. He's got to be that sentinel of liberty again for Marvel, and I think it's much like DC. When Superman is not done correctly and Superman sucks, while it's not the most important title at DC, the loss of the Superman character, being who he is, kills DC. It
Yeah,
kills DC because you're missing the heart of that universe. I think
right.
Steve being gone and not being that character, I think has a similar effect at Marvel, and so hopefully they can get it right. I think a step in the right direction. Let us know though, folks. Did you guys pick up Captain America #1 from Chip Zdarsky? If you did, what were your thoughts on it, and why do you think they've had so much trouble getting a Steve Rogers ongoing, working as of late? As always, we appreciate your thoughts. We will pivot to our second topic, a bit of a somber topic for sure. Sadly, Mike, me and you have been fans of comic books for a long time. And as me and you get older, some of the greats of this industry are sadly passing away. And an absolute titan of the Marvel Comics and DC Comics industry, Jim Shooter, sadly passed away this week. Mike, I'll kick it to you because you're more of a comic book historian on this. When you think about Jim Shooter, his legacy, who he was, what comes to mind for you?
A couple of things. I'm reading this book right now called Marvel: The Untold Story or something. It has a great section in it about Jim and his Marvel years. Um, Jim was a visionary as a teenager, and he loved Marvel comics. Um, but as it happened, when he was a kid, he thought DC Comics he would have a better chance at writing for DC than he would for Marvel. And he felt that DC needed more help. And he started sending in script ideas. The first script idea he sent in at 13 was accepted. And his career started from there. He worked for DC, I think, for about 5, 6 years or whatever. And then he finally got his dream job in the 70s writing for Marvel. And went on to be the editor and publisher, and it had an amazing career. But he was a visionary in so many ways, and controversial. There's a lot of folks there that don't think
He
highly of
rubbed the
him.
wrong way. Yeah.
But I will say this week, there's been a lot of really great videos about people lauding him, especially if you haven't seen it. The one Rob Liefeld did is amazing. And I'm happy to see him get, being paid tribute to. But yeah, when he left Marvel, like he knew he was always thinking years ahead. For example, in the 80s, after he left Marvel, he started Valiant Comics, and he understood the potential of the indies, 20, 30 years before they really started to break out. And just so many things. But please do go on, and check out some good stuff. I know the guy from Comic Tropes did one several years about him, which I think is really fair and balanced,
Yeah.
because he does have his detractors, but you got to hand it to the guy. I mean, he was in the business for many years, from being a
I mean, you look
fanboy
at
at 13
the
to
list
becoming
of
a pro.
things. Well, no, I mean, you look at his writing as a teenager, and then you just look at when he's EIC at Marvel, what he's responsible for. I mean, Claremont and Byrne on Uncanny X-Men and Fantastic Four, Frank Miller's Daredevil, Walt Simonson on Thor, Roger Stern on Avengers and Spider-Man.
He made these key decisions at a
Yeah,
time when the Marvel was outselling DC, but they were a little bit, with no rudder. And he put these creative teams together. And he's also been credited with having faith in Frank Miller where others did not.
yeah.
And I will send it over to you to talk about.
No, I mean, you talk about, I think the biggest thing is Claremont X-Men, Frank Miller, Daredevil. You're talking probably the definitive runs for most people for those characters. This is the guy who made that call, right? I think he also Secret Wars. He was the one who saw the potential in kind of
Yeah,
crossover events. I believe with the Dazzler comic book, he got that into specialty shops. So I mean, he's a guy who saw the potential of the medium. And I think the thing is, like, you'll hear some stories about people who didn't necessarily always like the way he did it. But what it reminds me of, and you and I always talk sports on here, there's some head coaches out there that aren't the most beloved guy, but they're fantastic at what they do. So, like, Bill Belichick's a great example of this. Bill Belichick was known as a stern, kind of a jerk sort of guy. But from a coaching aspect, there is no more successful coach in the history of the NFL because he knew what changes to make, who to keep, who to get rid of, what to launch, which initiatives, how to move his offense, how to move his defense, and it resulted in 6 Super Bowls for the Patriots, the most successful run. Jim Shooter is that for Marvel Comics. When you look at Secret
yeah,
Wars, Frank Miller's Daredevil, Simonson on Thor, Frank Miller Daredevil, Chris
right.
Claremont X-Men, John Byrne Fantastic Four, you're talking the majority of what most of us see is like the classics for people, now it's from his era, right?
Bronze
Outside
Age
the Stan
Marvel.
and Jack era, he's the guy who ran all of that. I think he also with the Treasury edition of Superman and Spider Man. I mean, like he
Yeah,
did so much, and sadly he's what we're missing from comic books now. What Jim Shooter
truly.
did such a good job at is taking a talent like Frank Miller and recognizing you and Daredevil is a marriage made in heaven, or Claremont and X Men and going, you are the right match for this. We don't seem to have people who do that anymore, and
And
that's what's
he
desperately needed.
and we talk about this a lot, but and Stan Lee was that way, I believe, with Marvel in the early years. But of course, Stan had moved on in the 70s. He was out in Hollywood trying to, also a visionary, right? He was trying to take these properties to television, movies, and cartoons,
Mm-hmm.
uh, and it was some success in the 70s. But that's where Stan was, and Jim was left to captain the ship. And I think where a lot of his detractors were, he was, could be a hands-on kind of editor, where he called the shots and helped plot a lot of these, um, uh, along with his creative team to make sure that they were going in the right direction, because he had a vision. And I know a lot of creatives didn't like that, but the fact was that Marvel needed a vision at that point in time, and he provided it. And like you said, Bronze Age Marvel, pretty much sums it up.
Yeah.
And
No.
if that was all he did amazing things. But that's not all he did. He also had the stuff when he was a teenager. He also
No,
had his,
13,
yeah,
13 submitting comics and getting him approved. I mean, it's just what
yeah.
a legendary, creative, and he's literally we are missing Jim Shooter from modern comics. That is
Oh
why
my
I
gosh,
think
I
we're the
know.
place that we're in is if we had a Jim Shooter still, I think some of these garbage fire ideas like Nazi Captain America never see the light of day. And we probably wouldn't be in an industry where we go 5 years with no Fantastic Four comic book and year or two with no Captain
But
America
we're
and
doing a
everything
movie,
being
but
canceled.
there's
Yeah.
no comic, but we're doing a movie. No, Jim Shooter would, yeah, that's what we need. We need, a heavy-handed editorial staff, and I kind of
That
see
knows what
that.
they're doing. Yeah.
Yeah,
And he certainly did. Just an absolute legend. Rest in peace, Jim Shooter. But great comic creator. Let us know your guys' thoughts on Jim Shooter. What do you think his legacy is and the best work that he did in Marvel, in your opinion? We will pivot to our third topic, Mike. Another not great one, and this has been a long developing one, but you and I actually had an opportunity to sit down and talk to a couple folks who work at our local shops and talk about the impact of this. And then we're seeing it on a larger scale. Diamond went bankrupt. Diamond, absolutely seemed to mismanage so many things. We know there's been a lot of publishers affected by this. Very publicly, we're seeing this week, Dynamite Comics apparently they're owed like $1 million by Diamond. They're apparently not being able to get a payout of that, and because of that, Dynamite seems to actually be having trouble making payroll, which could cause Dynamite to shut down or be significantly affected by this. Huge for me with Dynamite. Dynamite produces James Bond comic books, so I don't want Dynamite going anywhere. But this diamond industry, this diamond problem that we've had, this seems like it's affect. We talked to a couple comic store owners that me and you know. Big thing that we heard is this was affecting shops for a long time with Diamond, as far as books not coming in on time, them not knowing when the books were going to get there. So placing orders for books and then having to tell customers, hey, your copy of Daredevil isn't coming this week, it might be next week, and that potentially customers moving to different stores that did have the book or moving to digital altogether. We also heard a lot about smaller publishers, Diamond being or Dynamite being one of them, but even some of those smaller ones below that where books aren't able to get out anymore. There's no publisher to get their work. This just seems to be an absolute, for lack of a better word, crap show. I won't use the curse words there, but it seems to be going awfully. Mike, when you hear all of this with Diamond and how this is going, what comes to mind for you?
But since I've been collecting comics as an adult, they were the only game in town, so they kind of had a monopoly. This goes way back to the old days, and if you don't know your comic book history, uh, Donenfeld and Leibowitz, the creators, the inception of DC, of course, with MC Gaines, um, they came out of distributing pulps. So, but they knew the importance of the distributors early on, and a lot of money traded hands in distribution, for better or for worse. But Donenfeld, by all accounts, was really heavy-handed with his distributors. He made sure his books got out, but a lot of shenanigans went on with distribution, safe to say. And as the old distributors fell apart in the 60s and 70s, other people started to come in and take that place because it's a profitable business. Um, but there's no competition with Diamond for 40 years. And so I do feel like things went sideways. And when they were the only game in town, they were the only game in town. I will say in more recent times, DC was on the ball
Lunar,
and
yeah.
saw this coming during, and finally, put their foot down and said, no, we'll have Lunar, and we'll use, I think Midtown had a good distribution system. We'll find another way. We're through with you, Diamond. Marvel was left in the lurch to struggle along with all these other indie publishers, and Diamond carried them through the pandemic and out of the pandemic. But the wheels were falling off the bus, and as I understand it, a lot of these indie publishers really had no viable option. They
Yeah.
weren't able to get on with Lunar, and Penguin Random House was not open to them at this point, although now they are. Um, one, there's a couple of good things about Diamond, but in the end, they really they really messed up the comic book companies, especially the indies. And but one good thing that they comic shops did agree is their software was the bomb. They loved
Yeah.
how they ordered, and getting used to now they have to have two different software platforms to order for Marvel and DC, and I mean Marvel and the indies, and DC and some of the indies. But it's going to be painful. But I think having these two different distributors, Penguin Random House
And
and
Lunar.
and Lunar, I think is going to be a good thing because you'll have competition, and when there's competition, it usually breeds innovation and success. So it's about time. But I did not like some of the things I was hearing about how Diamond is handling their bankruptcy. A lot of people have inventory that's left over there that
Yep.
they're not getting back, and that Diamond might be liquidating to pay other debts rather than give them their. And there's a lot of bad things happening right now, and I really
Seems
don't.
like the smaller publishers are the one paying the price on that, and
And I
it's
like
terrible.
Dynamite. I don't want to see Dynamite go under. I don't want to see anybody go under, because we need more indie right now. And I just feel like, somebody will come in and save them or whatever. I don't know.
No, I mean, hopefully there'll be a solution for it. I know Dynamite's doing some like fundraising kind of stuff to keep things going. I mean, just talking to the local comic shop folks we do, they talked a lot about how some of these smaller shops in town got undone by this though. The delays had customers move on, unsure timelines, stuff like the comic book boxes that you and I love. Those are seem to be done. You've got Diamond Select toys and stuff like that that seems to be gone. I mean, there's just a lot of things that were left in the lurch by this, and sadly it's the local comic book shops and the smaller publishers that are paying the price, and your DCs and your Marvels, they were able to get ahead of it, and they have the mega companies behind them that could float something like this. So sadly it's not going to be Marvel and DC that really pay for this. It's going to be your Dynamites, your Titans, your Oni Press, those kind of smaller companies, and
Don't
unfortunately it
mess
doesn't
with
seem to be.
Titan.
Yeah,
Don't mess
hopefully
with
nothing with Titan.
or
But
Dynamite. Don't mess with either one of those.
yeah, no, especially in a growing market where indies, like you said, are becoming more and more prevalent. We need
And
more
Ghost
options for that.
Machine. What's going
Yeah,
to happen to Ghost Machine?
well, they're with Image, so I think they've pivoted over. But I mean,
Oh, that's right.
it's just sad what happened, and it's one of those things where because of the unsurety that Diamond had for so long, there's a lot of shops that already paid the price for this, and whatever resolution comes is too late. They already had to close up their shop. One of the stores me and you go to. I mean, we live in San Antonio. We live the store that what's it, Dragon's Lair that you go to. That's a really popular shop, very populated era. They talked a lot about how they were losing customers hand over foot because they just didn't know when they were going to get their books. And in a thing like comic books, where you've got reliant readers, your Wednesday warriors who know, man, hey, on Wednesday I go pick up my X-Men, my Spider-Man, my Daredevil, and you start having where, hey, man, we might have Daredevil next Friday, but I can't tell you, it's going to cost you. And sadly, that's been what we've seen out of this. Let us know though. What do you guys think about with what's happened with Diamond? Has this affected you guys at your stores, and how do you think this could be resolved? Hopefully, something will happen for Dynamite to keep them going because they seem to be getting kicked in the teeth on this more than anybody. We'll close out our last sort of topic for this. Talk a little bit about delays, and this affects a book that came out this week. Batman 89 Echoes. This is the sixth issue of this. They did two Batman 89 series. It was a six-issue series just called Batman 89. This was the follow up to that. Set in the universe of the Michael Keaton movies, basically pretends that Batman and Batman Returns were the only movies that happened, and kind of went forward from there. I haven't loved the stories, but it was nostalgia bait for me to see the Keaton Batman and everything again.
Right? I know, me
This
too.
issue comes out, though. I believe it's 19 months to get six issues across for this comic book. The first run, I believe, also was laden with a lot of delays. You top this on top of the fact that you've got the Batman Jim Lee series that's going right now, Hush 2, with more and more delays. I don't know, Mike, why do you think it is that this is, because these are not low profile books. This is Batman books. This to me, this is a major issue in the industry in that you can't give us consistent talent. And then when you do, it's like, hey, might take us 2 years to finish those six
Mm-mm.
issues. When you go back, Mike, and you see Kirby and how much he was able to put out, you see a modern artist like Dan Mora who's able to work on 2 or 3 books a month and get that out. Do you think it's a work ethic thing? Like, why do you think we are having delays and everything taking so long in comics? Do you think it's just a cultural shift? Like, what is your opinion on why this
It
happened now?
it goes back to the rudderless ship when you have the creatives uh, more in charge than the editor. It in Jim Shooter's era when he came on, there were delays in Marvel to where they were putting out fill-in issues and using old stories to and reprints to meet deadlines because the new stuff wasn't ready yet. Jim Shooter ended all of that. He was an on-time guy. You were going to be on time, and your deadline is your deadline. And he was like, "Hey, if I was 15 years old and I could meet a deadline when I was working for Mort Weisinger at 15, you
Yeah.
sure as hell can meet a deadline at Marvel Comics in 1975." And we just don't have that anymore. It's a cater to the creatives, which is great. We love our creatives. We want to give them freedom, but at the same time, you got to meet these deadlines. I mean, you got to have these books out, and it's a scheduling problem. It's got to be something in the org chart, like we're corporate guys, right? You break out the whiteboard in the conference room, and we got distribution here, printer it has to be here, and so your book needs to be here. Less changes in editorial, and so if you don't have it, you don't have it, and you can lose your job. But they're so cautious with the creatives that are at a premium, and they're constantly jumping ship to the indies.
Hmm.
And but when you talk to these, when you look at the interviews from some of these old guys like Carmine Infantino and Jack Kirby, they were working for one company during the day, working at night on another project. They were doing two books simultaneously, sleeping like 4 hours a day. And it was incredible. Carmine did it for about 2 years. He worked for two different companies. Steve Ditko did it all the time. Jack Kirby did it. They were moonlighting and producing this stuff. So it's not like it can't be done. I mean, I know these guys are the legends of all time. And
But
they're
yeah, they're the legends, but like it didn't seem to used to happen this much, and that we just this seems to be modern comic sport. And that look, this Batman '89 comic, like it because I had it on my pull list, it came into my. I totally forgot this comic existed. It's across 19 months. Like I picked it up, like, well, oh yeah, that did, and it killed any momentum the book would have. There's another Batman book, Gargoyle of Gotham. I believe that's supposed to be 3 issues. I think the second issue is out, and it was like a year in between issues, and there's been a year between the second and third one. Mark Waid, even with Brian Hitch, there was a Superman: The Last Days of I think Lex Luthor. Issue one came out, and it was a full almost year and like 3 weeks before the second issue came out.
That's
And you hear different
crazy.
reasons, like Mark Waid and Brian Hitch came out and said, like, hey, that first one probably shouldn't have been released. We told them it was going to be a huge delay. But it doesn't really matter. And one of the things is there's only a couple industries we see major delays. Video games happen, and those are massive studios with hundreds of millions of dollars and thousands of programmers or hundreds of programmers or hundreds of people involved. And so that kind of makes sense. We see movies get delayed. Right, makes sense. Thousands of people working, dozens of actors, probably reshoots, test screenings, all that kind of stuff. This is a 20-page comic book. It's a 20-page comic book. That it took you 19 months to finish 120 pages of a comic book. And again, I'm not saying I could do it, but that is your job. And I think that's the thing that doesn't, like you said, there's too much catering to creatives on some things, in that we don't seem to pay them well, and that seems to show. But at the end of the day, if you took a job, the job's the job, and you need to do the job. And this comic book killed it. Let's say that the first couple issues of this were just flying off the shelves and doing amazing. Because of the delay, it doesn't matter what the sales are on this. There is no momentum behind this anymore. I love Batman. I love that universe. I read it. I'm like, I don't know what the heck I'm reading because I don't remember those other 5 issues because it started when my kid was 1 and he's almost 4 now. Like, there's life happens, and it's tolerable when it's a movie with millions of dollars, a video game, that kind of stuff. When it's a 20-page comic book, it's like either don't announce it or don't start it or make sure it's done or something. But it's just delays kill comic books now. And I think because it would be better if they had told you, hey, we are releasing this quarterly. there will be one issue every 3 months or something like that. And we've seen
Yeah.
some publishers take that route where they pre-sell stuff and they're like, hey, it's coming out, late quarter 2025 or whatever. But when you have custom, especially for the big two, when 19 issues of Daredevil or Spider-Man or whatever can come out in between this issue coming out, you can't have it. It's going to kill the industry. And it's just like you said, we don't have the editorial that we used to. And this is, look, I think Jim Lee with Batman with Hush, the way that this is screwing up the relaunch, things like that. It's something where it's like, man, you would think that Jim Lee being in charge of DC Comics, if an artist messed up something like this for him, you would think he'd be like, hey, you're not going to work here anymore. And
Right.
sadly, as much as I don't think we need to beat up on creatives and get on them, at a certain point, it's like, dude, you're killing the sales. You're killing the momentum. Your inability to complete stuff is hurting. And I'm not here to tell anybody, if you've got life circumstances, different things that are happening, that's awful. Like I hope things get better for you. But at the same time, a job is a job. And the same way that you and I go into work, and if a project is due and it was like, hey man, sorry, can't get to it. I'll let you know in 19 months. We're not going to be on the next project and we're probably not going to be there the next day.
Yeah.
Comics seems to be this weird backward place right now where 20 pages a month and it's like, nah, I just can't do it. It's interesting. But let us know. What do you guys think down below? Have delays really impacted your enjoyability of comic books like me? Were you reading this and completely forgot it existed? And I'll say this, it certainly wasn't worth the wait, and it seemed to be a very rushed product as well. But let us know what you guys think down below. As always, folks, thank you guys so much for watching. Let us know what you think on any of the topics we talked about. We'll kind of splice these as well and cut it into individual videos as well, so you guys may see different portions of this that you can watch if watching a little smaller portion works better for you. Let us know your thoughts as always. God bless you, folks. Happy Independence Day. Have a great day.
Thanks, everybody.